Well, welcome. My name is Alex Josh, and I'm an architect at the Microsoft group at NetApp. And my Twitter handle is @ajosh. Today we're going to be talking about private clouds, and specifically why we fail. It's always interesting giving a presentation that has a negative title, right? Usually you come to these sessions and it's all sunshine and loveliness, and if you buy our product, puppies will spontaneously come out of your data center and lovely things like that. This isn't that kind of presentation, okay? My background is not in sales and marketing. Right? My background is enterprise-class data center operations. I started off in a Fortune 500 IT shop, and I spent a number of years pulling cable and all those kinds of wonderful things that junior guys do. I spent 12 years at Microsoft. As I started off as an exchange consultant, and then worked my way up to architect. I actually led the architectural role at Microsoft for a while, and I was the role owner for the architect career path at Microsoft Services. Later, we founded a program called Catalyst. Catalyst was the precursor to a program called MCA, the Microsoft Certified Architect Program. Anybody here, any MCA alumni in the room? No? You? The MCA program, if you haven't heard of it, was the kind of the counterpart to MCSE. It was the architect version of the MCSE. Before we created MCA, there really was no mechanism at Microsoft to certify and recognize architects. So today, I'm the lead architect for NetApp's Microsoft Private Cloud solution. So I spend pretty much all of my time worrying about the private cloud space, talking to customers, working with our engineers, working with Microsoft engineers, talking about private cloud and trying to figure out why customers are successful, why they're not successful, where the core pain points are, where they're not. So that's pretty much my life, and that's where I spend a lot of time. And that's why I felt like it was very important to give this presentation. About a year ago, I wrote a maybe 3-4 paragraph blog post on this subject. And I really had no intention of spending any more time on it. But what was interesting is I just got an immense response from that blog post from customers and partners and other people that I had worked with saying, hey, you know what? This is really a problem, right? We're really struggling with this. We need somebody to spend some more time on this. So I've actually spent about a year, and I wound up writing a book called Why We Fail on the same topic. So there's a lot of interesting work going on in this space. The most interesting thing that I found when I started on this project is we couldn't even define what a cloud was. Now, as an engineer, you don't usually have that problem, right? When I started off in the exchange world, I didn't have to explain to people what email was. People pretty much knew what email was. So somebody said, what is Exchange? And I said, Exchange is Microsoft's mail server. Oh, OK, right? No problem. Let's go build one now. But when I say to people, yeah, I'm responsible for NetApp's private cloud solution, I'd say about half the time people say, well, what is that? And what do you mean by that word? Because I talked to this guy over here, and he said something completely different. So it turns out that in practice, that phrase doesn't actually mean anything. Or it means everything, depending on how you look at the world. But what's also interesting about that word is that everybody seems to want it, right? If you talk to senior management in IT organizations, it's very rare to find one that doesn't want cloud, right? I want some of that cloud stuff. What is that? I don't know, but I want it. OK? You know, here's some crayons. There you go. Draw a cloud, right? Well, it doesn't mean anything. So what happens, though, is there's this immense pressure in the industry to deliver cloud, right? And I'm assuming because you're here, you must be in the IT industry. And I have a strange feeling that you're probably under some pressure to deliver cloud to your management. Anybody here not having a cloud conversation inside their companies? Yeah, right? So the definitions vary, right? It could mean whatever you choose to make it mean. And as an architect, that's very fundamentally disturbing to me. I just have a negative, severe, almost allergic reaction to that. I live in a world that's highly defined. Right? In my world, you define your terms up front, you have a framework, you decide what those terms mean, and then you go build something. You can't just make stuff up in my world. So I needed a definition before I could even proceed with the project to find out what was going on in this space. So why is this a problem? Why do I even care, right? So what? Well, it turns out that according to Gartner, who seems to be pretty good about this kind of stuff, 78% of enterprise IT shops will, quote unquote, deploy a private cloud computing strategy by 2014. It's 2012. So in the next 2 years, 3/4 of you in this room are going to deploy cloud. Notice it says private cloud, not public cloud. You guys ready for that? I'm not. The next statistic, 62% of all IT projects fail. 62%. What does that mean? Well, I'll do a little math. That pretty much means everybody on this side of the room, sorry guys, is going to implement cloud and fail. Everybody's moving over to the other side of the room all of a sudden. That's not good, right? We need to figure out how we can stack the odds in our favor. And oh, by the way, this 62% project number has nothing to do with cloud, right? That's all projects. Do you think that the cloud is on the easy end or on the hard end of IT projects? I'm betting it's on the hard end, right? Compare this to deploying, oh, I don't know, Exchange, just to pick a product at random. I'm guessing it's a little bit harder because Exchange runs on this platform, right? So all the stuff you had to do for Exchange, you do that after you're done with this one. So your odds of failure for a complex project, just guessing here, may be a little higher than that, right? Everybody suitably depressed now? Not to worry, not to worry. So how do we solve this problem? Well, first of all, we need to define our terms, right? If you're an architect, if you're designing something, the first question you're going to ask yourself is, what the heck am I designing? What am I building? If you Bing the following phrase, cloud definition framework, you get about 1 million hits. And I've done this, so I can tell you for sure there's 1 million of them. They're all equally good, and they're all equally bad. So how do we pick one? Well, it turns out Microsoft and a couple of other folks have spent a lot of time looking at this problem, and one of the best definitions out there is actually from the US federal government. Now, for those of you that are US citizens, I agree, this is frightening. For our European counterparts, it's probably more frightening. As scary as this is, NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, which is a US federal government agency, has done a fantastic job. And yes, I am stunned in my explanation, and I'm sure there's some federal government employees out here. Apologies to you. I was frankly quite stunned, and I'm sorry that I am stunned, but I just am. You read this thing, it makes sense, it's cogent, it's to the point, it's direct, and it's actionable. And as an architect, that's what I need, right? I need frameworks that are specific, direct, and actionable. So NIST has defined basically 4 types of clouds: private clouds, community clouds, and public clouds. Hybrid is just some combination of the other 3. So far, so good, right? Very simple, makes a lot of sense to me. It's either my stuff or your stuff, right? We're sharing the stuff or we're not sharing the stuff. Totally makes sense. Binary, right? I'm one or the other. There's software as a service. Oh, I know what that is, right? I rent services on the cloud, right? Office 365, makes sense. Platform as a service, right? I just want the platform. I know what that is, right? Azure. Infrastructure as a service. I get infrastructure but nothing else. I get VMs in the cloud. Okay, I know what that is too. This is all making sense to me. Lovely. So what does this really look like? What's inside the box? Well, in their model, there's only 5 essential characteristics. This is fantastic, right? There's 5 things, easy to remember. On-demand self-service. Yep, makes sense. I know what that is. Broad network access. Well, that's pretty obvious. You've got to have that or you're not a cloud. Resource pooling, rapid elasticity, measured service. You must have these 5 things in the NIST definition or you are not a cloud by definition. So if your leadership is saying, hey, I want one of these cloud things, I would suggest you would not go far wrong starting with these 5 things. It's up to you, of course. It's your network. But these 5 are pretty essential if you want to call yourself a cloud, and specifically a private cloud, i.e. inside your firewall. There's a bunch of other common characteristics that are not needed, right? Like scale, homogeneity, virtualization. I was actually quite pleased by the fact that virtualization was common but not mandatory. Right? For a lot of people, virtualization is cloud, cloud is virtualization. And I think we in the industry have done a really poor job of muddying our waters here, right? I don't agree with the statement that cloud is virtualization and virtualization is cloud. That doesn't really make sense to me. Virtualization is a common way to deliver cloud, and some could probably argue that it's the best way to deliver cloud. But the whole point of clouds is I could have 2 monkeys and a typewriter. As long as you get the data out the back end, it doesn't really matter how I got it to you, right? It's a cloud. It doesn't matter where it came from. So this whole notion that you must have virtualization to have cloud, to me, is an inherent contradiction of the term. Are you going to deploy your cloud on a virtualization layer? Probably. That's the easiest way to do it. But it's not required. And I like that. So that's NIST, right? Great thing about NIST, it's not vendor specific, right? I didn't make this up. This is not some random vendor telling you what to do. This is a neutral third-party arbiter, NIST. Their job is to define terms. That's what they do. They've defined one. Fantastic, right? So now we have a framework. Lovely, fantastic. Let's go build one. Here's the problem. I give you that framework, and you go off, and what are you going to do? What's the first thing that you're going to do? Just guessing here, but I'm betting you're going to go install Hyper-V, right? You're going to go get System Center. You're going to go get the Cloud Services Process Pack, and you're going to start clicking OK. Right? What's the difference between a developer and an infrastructure person? Any idea? It's follow-through when you click OK. Right? We click OK. Developers write code. We click OK. So that's what probably most of us would go do. That's not going to do it. The reality is the essential element of cloud is a customer-centric business model. Not, repeat, not technology. And when a guy trying to sell you technology tells you it's not about technology, it's not about technology. Right? I have every incentive to tell you that this is a technology problem that you can solve by giving me more money. Let's be honest. But that's not going to do it. Because cloud's not about that. Cloud's not about technology. Just the opposite. It's about a business model. Why is Amazon EC2 different than everything that you're doing right now? Is it because of the virtualization platform they use? Does anybody know what virtualization platform they use? Does it matter? Turns out it doesn't matter, right? What's different about Amazon EC2 is that my grandmother can take her credit card, go to Amazon, and get a VM. Is that a good idea? Probably not. But she can do it. It's about enabling the end user. It's a business model. Anybody who wants infrastructure can get it basically for free. That's why it's different. And when your management asks you for cloud, that's what they mean. That's what they want. They don't want Hyper-V. They don't want System Center. They don't want CSPP. They want instant infrastructure whenever they want it for whatever purposes with no questions asked. Is that what you want? Probably not. Because that's not what we do, right? We're not in the business of giving handguns to children, right? We're in the business of making sure you know what you're doing before we give you the gun. Bullets cost extra. The majority of people that I work with, and I don't mean this as an insult or anything like that, and I'm not trying to suggest any pejorative context here, but the majority of the people that I work with approach this as a technology problem. But we already said it's not a technology problem. So if you proceed along a technology path, what are your odds of success? Slim to none. I would submit this is why you fail. Make sense? I would also argue that it's our fault It's the architect's fault that this has occurred. It's not the engineer's fault. It's not management's fault. It's not the vendor's fault. It's our fault. I consider myself an architect. That is my profession. If an architect allows this to happen in his organization, then this is a failure of architectural practice. And what do I mean by architectural practice? To me, this is just Alex Josh's random view of the world. Architecture, by definition, is the intersection between technology and business. It is the function of the architect to understand the business requirements and to align them to technology capabilities, right? Businesses have needs, wants, requirements. Technology has possibility. Where those two circles overlap is architecture. So if you allow your project team to proceed along a path that's not fundamentally sound from a business model perspective, whose fault is that? It's the architect's fault. If you have an architect business title, I would strongly suggest that you look at this and think about this a lot before you proceed on your private cloud journey. I know I have. So it's really about managing and reducing your risk. Right? We already know we're going to do this. We've already been told by others. Right? The cloud paradigm has so much power, right? And is so revolutionary to everything that we're trying to do that this is a journey that we're all going to be on. Right? The reality is we're all going to do this. And really the only question is, are we going to do it well or are we going to do it poorly? So we collectively need to make the decision that we're going to do this well. And what that means is focusing on the things that actually matter. So really, there's two kinds of risks. There's business risk and technical risk. And again, I would submit that we tend to focus on the technical risk the most, because that's where we're the most comfortable as engineers. Fortunately or unfortunately, technical risk is the risk that's easiest to mitigate. Right? You can buy down your technical risk. Right? Companies like ours will simply give you a full rack of gear that's already running and configured. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. So that drops your technical risk quite a bit. However, I can't sell you a business best practice, right? I can't change the culture of your organization. I can't convince your management to do things for the right reason. I can suggest, I can beg, right? But I can't make you do that. I cannot sell that to you. That's not something you can buy from me. Hence this talk. So let's think about business risk, right? People and process risk. Funny thing about people and process. So when I was a young man, one of my early jobs, as I mentioned, was installing Exchange for a living. And in those days, we liked to think that we had a pretty good product. And in fact, we like to think that it was pretty much better than anything else in the market. So we would go and talk to customers about upgrading their current system. And the funny thing is that some shops had horribly run email experiences. Horribly run email experiences. Mail wouldn't get delivered, mail servers would crash, and we're like, oh, we'll go buy Exchange and all those things will get better, right? So we sell them Exchange. 2 years later, their Exchange system is completely in disarray, right? Just as bad as their old mail system was. And then we had other customers that were running really horrible software. I mean, like the worst, nastiest hacks you've ever possibly imagined. Worked just fine, right? Mail got delivered, nothing ever broke. We gave them Exchange, still worked fine. Nothing ever broke. At 22, I found this very confusing. Like, how is this possible? Right? So I'm not really quick. It took me a few years to figure out what was going on, because I'm slow. It turns out that they had people and process to make sure that people didn't do dumb things. Like, hey, maybe we should make sure our servers are patched on a regular basis. Maybe we should schedule an outage window. Hey, maybe we should do the recommended maintenance once in a while. Right? And there are some people that didn't have those things. And their systems didn't work so well. There's also a concept called managed portfolios, which I'm actually going to talk about a little bit more deeply. It turns out that the way you manage an IT organization needs to be different depending on the class of technology you're dealing with and the level to which that technology directly impacts your business. And that's called IT portfolio management. And that's kind of a tough subject, so I'm going to have a couple slides on that later. And then the last thing is IT and business alignment, right? Are the IT projects that you're spending money on and focusing on, are they adding real value to your business? Question number one. Question number two, how do you know that? Right? How are you measuring that? So I had a professor once who used to say, there's no such thing as a benefit that cannot be measured. Right? Ever heard this phrase, intangible benefit? He hated that phrase. Right? That was an oxymoron in his world. There's no such thing as an unmeasurable benefit. Right? That's called not a benefit. And the point he was trying to make, he was a business professor, not an IT professor, but I think the point still calls through. The point he was trying to make is that you're either making the business better in some specific and measurable way, or you are not. And therefore, you are simply overhead that needs to be managed to the lowest possible price point. I don't know about you, but you want to be down here or you want to be up here? I like being up here, right? So how do you know that you are actually providing benefit to the underlying business? I'm not going to embarrass anybody by asking for a show of hands, but just as a mental exercise, when was the last time you reported net business benefit to your business leadership if you're an IT person? And when I say net business benefit, I mean you sold more widgets, right? You reduced operations costs, right? You avoided the hire of 15 people, whatever. I'm guessing that very few of you have made a report like that recently. So how do you know if you're actually benefiting your underlying business? The other answer, when I ask that question, I say, how are you adding value to the business? A lot of times the answer I get is, well, I add value to the business by making sure that the lights stay on, right? I'm an operations guy. That has value. No, right? It doesn't actually. It turns out that things that everybody does provide no strategic benefit to the business. Those are key operational. Yes, they need to be done, but they're overhead. They're an expense item. If you can do it for $1 less at the same quality, which of course is always the trick in our business, then you should. But something that makes me more competitive, right? That helps me sell more widgets or invent products more quickly, right? So like I used to work at a drug company. And in the drug company business, it's all about getting drugs to market faster, right? Getting through that clinical trials process in the drug business takes a long time. And it's incredibly expensive. So if you can shorten that process by 10%, that's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. Right? So we built a system that helped them submit applications to the FDA in 6 months instead of 10 months. That was worth like $1 billion to the company. That's what I'm talking about. Right? On the other hand, the project that I worked on, the Exchange email project, did it add value to the company? Probably. Did our competitor down the street also have email? Sure. Of course they did. Did they have pretty much the same email that I was giving them? Yep. Pretty much the same. So how was I helping my company build drugs better and faster? Answer, I wasn't. Right? This is the fallacy in the way we look at our world. You're not actually adding value to the business unless you're helping them make more money, do things faster, do things better, provide better customer service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, if the business model is the most important part of cloud, what kind of business model do you want? So I want you to take a look at this list. Are you on the left side or the right side? Do you want to be on the left side or the right side? If you have an IT standards committee, you're on the left. Yeah? If you have IT managed budgets, you're on the left side. If you do advanced capacity planning to your end customers' applications, that's on the left side. What's on the right? Basically, have credit card, will travel. Which side of this graph do you think that EC2 is on, or Azure is on? The left or the right? I'll give you a hint. It's the right side. The right side. Yeah, that's right. Right? The public cloud providers really don't care what you're doing on your platform. When your leadership says, I want cloud, that's what they mean. That's what they want. There was a study that was done that said, they came out and they said, they surveyed about 1,000 companies that had successfully deployed cloud strategies in their IT infrastructure, and they said, what were the top benefits of moving to cloud? Now, I was going to guess, if I was going to guess, cost, right? Cloud's probably cheaper than building your own infrastructure. I figured that would be the number one answer. Nope, that wasn't the number one answer. Turns out the number one answer was data mobility. I'm like, data mobility? What the hell does a cloud have to do with data mobility? Right? If I've got data inside the firewall, you just set up IPsec or VPN tunneling, and boom, what the hell are they talking about? That makes no sense to me. Why would you go to the cloud to get data? Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The IT Security Standards Organization won't let you talk to the databases inside the firewall. But the one I put on Amazon, the one I put on Azure, oh, I can do whatever the hell wait a minute. The benefit to moving to cloud was the fact that they got away from IT's control. That was the benefit that they cited. I'm like, oh, okay. So really, the question you want to ask yourself is not, do I want to deploy Hyper-V, or do I want to do a self-service portal? The question is, what business do I want to be in? Do I want to have the business model on the left or the business model on the right? Make sense? So if the main benefit to the business is being able to do whatever the heck they want to do, and then you provide them with a system that's totally locked down and meets standards and does all the lovely things and does it the proper way, according to us, do you think that that project will be successful? Do you think end users will flock to your cloud? Probably not, right? The whole reason why they want this is to get the freedom. And that's okay. Right? That's perfectly fine. Not to worry. The subtitle of this presentation is How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Cloud. Right? This really bothered me when I figured this out. I'm like, whoa, that's not cool, right? You just gave a loaded handgun to a child. Don't do that, right? My entire career has been based around the idea that it's my job to protect end users from themselves. Right? Isn't that our job? Make sure you don't break the network, make sure you don't break the SAN, make sure, right? He's laughing. He knows what I'm talking about. There's at least one operations guy in the room because he's laughing his ass off. That's exactly right. That's not what we're supposed to be doing anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We're officially dinosaurs. That's not the point. The point is that we are not there to protect them from themselves. We are there to provide service. We are a service provider. We no longer have users. We have customers. We have internal customers. And that is a totally different way of looking at the universe. Because a user uses the system whether they like it or not. A customer takes their money and goes away. That's a totally different deal. So why is this okay? Why am I okay with this? The reality is because they're the ones that write the checks, so they get to decide. And it's okay that they get to decide. The lesson of the cloud in the end is that the customers decide. And that our business is to not pass judgment on them. Our business is to help them achieve their goals in smart, safe, acceptable ways. That is why we exist. Otherwise, you're just building freeways down the middle of the wheat field with no destination in mind. How well does that work? Yeah, ask North Korea about that. Right? That doesn't work too good. It turns out that consumer-centric economies work central planned economies don't work. That's the lesson of the last 50 years. It turns out that I've been running a Stalinist IT organization my entire career, right? I've been in the wrong business. I'm on the losing side of this war, of the Cold War, the whole time. If you don't recognize this picture, by the way, this is a picture of the Korean Peninsula from space, right? That line is South Korea. Above it is North Korea. Notice the difference, right? There's nothing happening in North Korea at night. Not a good party town. So what does this mean? What's the takeaway? How can we be more successful? How do we need to change to improve our odds of success? Buy my product. No, wait, that's wrong. Okay. We need to think about the difference between traditional IT and customer-centric IT. And it's always the reformed smokers that tell you how bad smoking is, right? So as an ex-smoker, I can tell you all the horrible things that are happening to your body every time you smoke. As a reformed, traditional, centralized IT guy, right, I think that I'm well equipped to explain to you why that's not so great. In my world, where I came from, so before I worked for Microsoft, I worked for a pretty large Fortune 500 company. And I worked in the central planning department, right? And in fact, we were called the standards and practices team. And our job was to select technology that our end users were allowed to use. And if it wasn't on our list, they couldn't do it. And how did we enforce that? We took their budgets away, right? They just physically could not purchase anything unless it was from us. So we set IT standards, and the reason why we did that is we felt like if we didn't, then chaos would reign and horrible bad things would happen. But in a customer-centric IT organization, that's not what you want to do, right? You want to support the business requirement. You want the end departments to define their goals, not the IT department to define the goals. In a traditional organization, we were very focused on operational excellence. That first IT shop I ever worked for out of college, we had this long hallway that went down into the data center, right, which was in the basement. And on the hallway, we had a piece of paper that had this graph. It said system availability and uptime. And it was at 100%. And it started over there, and I think the hallway was about as long as this wall back here. And it started over there, and it went all the way down the hallway. Turns out we had had no downtime in 5 years. Amazing. How is that possible? I said, you know, it's funny because I was out at a distributed site the other day, and we couldn't log into the mainframe. So I'm wondering what's going on with this graph. Oh, that graph, that's CPU uptime. Say what? Yeah, we only measure CPU uptime. You know, endpoints are always going down. You know, really. So if the CPU is up and the endpoint's down, how much work are people getting done? Well, I don't know. That's not my problem. This is sort of a problem, right? Focusing on operational excellence doesn't really matter. If the CPU is up, it doesn't matter. The question is, are the customers getting their work done? Are they satisfied with the level of service that they're receiving? You can have 50 outages a week, but if the customers don't notice, who cares? Right? That's now your problem, not their problem. That doesn't affect the business. And how do you measure that? You have to ask them. Right? You have to talk to real people. You have to get out there in the field and see what they're doing. So for those of you that are in IT, how many of you have done a ride-along with an actual end user? Awesome. Right? This is what I'm talking about. So when I worked for the drug company, I don't know anything about making drugs. Right? So I sat down with a scientist, and he walked me through his day. I was like, well, how do you do this? What's going on? We sat down with the people that were submitting to the FDA, you know? And they literally had these, file cabinets, right, of stuff. I'm like, oh, my God, is this like 1950? I'm like, oh, OK. And now as an architect, I'm like, well, I can fix that problem. I can fix that problem. I can fix that problem. It turns out that engineering in the old days was how we made our bones. Right? If I knew more about Windows than the next guy, I was probably going to get promoted. So I went out and I got my MCSE, right? and I got, blah, 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 training, yeah. Do the end customers really care about how many letters you have after your name? Not so much, right? What they care about is, are you a good consultant? Are you a good listener? Do you care about their problems? Do you drill down to the underlying need that they have and solve that need? It's a consultative skill set, it turns out, not an engineering skill set. Do we still need engineers? Yeah, of course, right? But the skill set that the end customer perceives is actually consulting, not engineering. In a centralized organization, you set policy, right? You say, this is policy. In a customer-centric IT organization, we seek input. Right? What do you need? I'm going to give you what you need. How can I make your life better? How can I take your pain point away? Traditional IT love doing these big, massive projects, right? Multi-million-dollar SAP implementations, right? I know a lot of guys that got really rich installing SAP for big companies. Is there any benefit to that? I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know. And I'm not picking on SAP, right? Pick your favorite ERP platform. It really depends. It depends on the way it's implemented. It depends on what the customer needs. It depends on what problem you're trying to solve, right? If the FTC is investigating you because of poor accounting practices, maybe that project is pretty damn important, But what I have found is that it's actually the smaller projects, the quick turnaround projects, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 people a month, less than $1 million. It turns out those are the projects that really change people's lives in very fundamental ways, right? The ability to take a small annoyance away from a key end customer and repeat that process over and over again, the ability to react quickly, it turns out that when you put all those together, you provide an immense amount of value. But in the old days, you would never get promoted unless you ran a big IT project, right? You had to be the project manager of, whatever, the SAP project, to become, a director and to become a, VP, whatever, right? So I don't know how many CIOs are ex-ERP guys, a lot of them. We used to organize our group by technology, right? I was the email guy, and I had a buddy who was the Windows guy, and I had another buddy who was the Unix guy. In a customer-centric world, that doesn't really matter. You need to be organized by customer, right? I'm the gas spectrography guy. I'm the drug interactions person, right? I'm supporting manufacturing. And then you focus on that specific area of expertise. You understand your business in a very fundamental way. In the old days, we used to be focused on technology. We were successful because we deployed 5 technologies this quarter, right? We deployed Exchange, we deployed Windows, we upgraded to Vista. Haha, just kidding. Hey, I was at Microsoft at the time during Vista, so I can make jokes about it. I'm allowed. In a customer-centric IT, we're focused on business value, right? I helped the widget plant make an extra 1 million widgets this month. Therefore, I am successful. How did you do that? Does it matter? Not really. In a traditional organization, we also tended to deliver our projects in-house, right? Yeah, we would bring in contractors and stuff like that, but they were our projects. We owned them. In a customer-centric, you may or may not do that, right? It may be that the best answer for your customer is to simply broker service to a third-party provider. The best answer might be, you know what? Take this entire application, put it up on Azure. Don't go into our data center because we're not ready for you. Right? Go buy Office 365. That might be the right answer. If we're truly customer-centric, we always give them the right answer, not necessarily the answer that's best for building our organizations. And that's very difficult to do, isn't it? Right? You might be putting yourself out of a job. So there is definitely some tension here. Right? It's not necessarily in IT's best interest to do what's in the company's best interest. Hopefully, those things are always aligned. But we have to recognize the reality that that's not always true. Right? We live in the real world. We're all adults. That may not happen. And you have to recognize when you have a conflict there. So that leads us to portfolio management. So if you have all these different projects running around your organization, how do you decide which ones you're going to do in-house, which ones you're not, which ones you're going to put in cloud, right? It turns out that these projects are different depending on where they live in the IT portfolio. And I said earlier in the presentation that I was going to get back to this, and so here we are. There are a lot of ways to do IT portfolio management. And just like cloud, they're all great. And just like cloud, they all suck. Right? I happen to like this one, which actually comes from a business school in the UK called Cranfield School of Management. Excellent, excellent school. If you're from the UK, you're very, very, very lucky because there's some really good thinking going on in the UK on this subject. They divide the world into 4 quadrants. And the reason why I like 4 quadrants is because if you're working with a Harvard MBA type person, they love quadrants. Gartner has 4 magic quadrants. Strange. Why is that? Yeah? Everybody has the 4 quadrants because that's what they teach them in MBA school, I guess. So in the Cranfield model, they have 4 quadrants. And the axes are, on the bottom, the business dependence on the current solution, right? And on the side there, it's contribution to the business future. So one is kind of current value, not current cost, not current effort, current value. And the other one is potential in the future. And if you think about it, this is exactly the way a stock is priced. Right? The reason why Apple is worth so much is a combination of they're making a ton of money now, but there's an expectation in market that they're going to make a lot more money in the future. Right? Facebook, not making so much money now compared to Apple. But man, they think they're going to make a lot of money in the future, so their stock is probably going to go up. Microsoft, tons of money now. The market is like, well, we're not sure how much more money you're going to make in the future, so their stock's a bit flat right now. Right? So the concept here is to manage your IT investments similarly to the way that you would manage a stock portfolio. You want to balance your risk, right? You want to manage your portfolio, and you want to do so in an intelligent manner of forethought, right? So if you look at the top quadrant, it's over here, it's high potential. So high potential would be defined as something that's not really adding any value now, but man, we think this could go big. But we're not really sure. So there's a lot of risk associated with that quadrant, isn't there? The next one is strategic. This is adding a lot of value now. And we think it's going to add a lot of value in the future. So now, all of a sudden, it's not really about risk. It's about execution. Because we know this is important. The other one, we weren't certain. This one, we know. It's definitely important. Then you go down to key operational, right? It's adding business value now, but really it's not going to change over time, right? This technology is kind of peaked out. And then you're down into support. It's important, you're keeping the lights on, but really there's no strategic value to the company in doing this. We could do it or outsource it or not. The cheapest way we can do it is the best way, right? So let me give you, to make this more real for you, let me give you an example. So the example would be like the ATM, right? So when I was a kid, and please no speculation on my age, thank you, there was no such thing as ATMs. You actually had to talk to a real person to get money out of the bank. Shocking, right? Those of us that are old enough to remember that, that was the way it used to be. If you're under 20, you have no idea what I'm talking about. And then a couple of banks, and specifically the Bank of America in the United States, decided this idea that we would have a machine that you would push buttons on and magically money would appear. The guys who invented it are like, you know, we think this is pretty cool. We think this is a big deal. The guys running the bank are like, I don't know if people really want to talk to a machine, right? They like our tellers. Tellers are friendly, right? The bank is about the experience with the customers. Have a little chat, you know, talk to grandma, exchange some stamps. So we're not sure. So when they deployed ATMs, they deployed them as a high potential project, right? Let's install this thing, let's check it out, let's see how it's going to go. Very quickly, what happened was it became super obvious that this was a huge deal, right? The ability to get your money whenever you wanted, 24 hours a day, without talking to a person, was massive, and it fundamentally changed the banking industry. So quickly, the technology went from high potential to strategic. Banks that had ATMs were more successful than banks that didn't have ATMs, right? And banks that had them grew quickly, and banks that didn't have them shrank. So everybody had these crash programs all of a sudden to go build ATM networks. Well, of course, what's the natural outcome of that activity? Everybody's got one now. So you're not adding any value. If all of your competitors all have ATMs and they all do exactly the same thing, how can this be a strategic program? It's not. So what happens is, over time, it drops from strategic down to key operational. This is important, right? If you don't have this, you're not a bank. But we're not getting any significant business advantage over our competitors. It's just something we have to do. Well, then what happened? Well, then we had the rise of the independent ATM network. People started installing ATMs that didn't own banks. Now there's ATMs like, gas stations, the mall, right? I think there's an ATM outside the door here, right? I know there's one in the casino. Never seen a casino without an ATM. So now it's like, now the bank is thinking, maybe we need an ATM, maybe we don't need an ATM. And in fact, there's a bank that I do business with called ING Direct here in the United States, which is an outgrowth of the ING Bank in the Netherlands. Doesn't have branches at all. They're an internet-only bank. If I want to get my money out, I go to somebody else's ATM. Hey, support. It's no longer key operational for them, it's support. So you can see how one piece of technology has gone through all 4 of those quadrants over time. And that's not unusual, right? It's not uncommon for technologies to work down that stream. So what's the problem here? Why do I bring this slide up? How many IT people do you think are arguing that their project should go from here, strategic, down to here, key operational? 0. What we're saying is, this is strategic. This is strategic. What I'm doing is important. I'm not wasting my time here. This is super important. It's important to me. Therefore, it must be important to the whole company, right? So we are not doing our jobs and being honest with ourselves about the amount of value we're adding on the stuff that we're working on. And we sure as hell are not telling people, oh yeah, take my project that I have 20 guys on, move that into support, right? We're not making that argument. It's not in our best interests. Because that means I might just outsource the whole thing or stop doing it. So we as architects, as professionals, right, as consultative IT people, need to be helping the company understand how these projects work through the portfolio and change the way we manage them. You do not manage a high potential program the way you manage a key operational program. The risk profiles are different. The investment level is different, right? The speed at which you operate is different. If you're in a high potential project and somebody asks for a change, how fast do you need to implement that change? Right away. Because the whole point is you're trying to create future business advantage. On the other hand, if you're working on a project that's in support mode and somebody asks for a change, should you do that immediately? Or should you schedule it for your regularly occurring monthly outage and do everything at once because that's the cheapest and most efficient way to do it? I would suggest the latter. So the operations cadence is different. The design process is different. The risk management process is different depending on where you are in this portfolio. How many of you do portfolio management exercises before you start an IT project? 1, 2? Oh, more than I thought, actually. A few of you. If you don't do that, how do you know how to manage the project? How much risk are you going to take? How rapid of an adoption cycle are you going to be on? You don't know. Because those are business inputs, not technical inputs. So in the book, I actually have a chapter on this subject, which I'm not going to be able to go through in a lot of depth here. But what we do is we build a fictional company, the Acme Widget Company, and I kind of give a scenario and say, okay, here's what the Acme Widget Company is doing, and they have manufacturing, in the United States, and they have Cork, Ireland, and I kind of go through these fictional scenarios, and then I help you take the IT projects that are on the table and then break them down into the portfolio, right? So, for example, in the case of Acme Widgets, they feel that their key business advantage against their rivals is customer service. Right? They're making their bones on that we're a better company to work with than our competitors, our core competitors. Right? So if you think about businesses that you interact with, some of them have that strategy and some don't. Right? So like, for example, Comcast. Right? So I'm a Comcast customer. They've recently decided that their key differentiator is going to be customer service. Right? So they do things now like if they miss an appointment, they give you $50. stuff like that, right? So for them, optimizing the customer care experience on their portal becomes hugely important. And in fact, they believe that if their customer care portal is better than their competitor's customer care portal, that'll generate more revenue. So that piece of technology is now raised up from where it was, key operational, up here to strategic, right? Because they believe that there's a direct line between the quality of that web experience from the end customer to the number of widgets they sell. Did the IT department make that decision? Did the IT department, I'm asking a question. Did the IT department make this decision? All together now? No. No, they didn't, right? The business made that decision. In consultation with IT, right? IT consults, IT advises. Sometimes we beg a little, right? On the other hand, things that I spent my career building, email, file, and print, they're down here. They're like, everybody's got that. If our email system delivers in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, doesn't matter. Which really kills me because that's where I spent a lot of my career. But that's the way they felt, right? So they're probably a good candidate for Office 365, for example. Right? Why don't we just remove that expense entirely? We'll just get it from Microsoft. Make sense? So now the IT organization is focused on the things that they and the business agree will add the most value to the corporation long term. Selling more widgets, making more widgets, designing new widgets, all those kinds of things. That's what the widget company does. The widget company is not in the IT business, they're in the widget business. The other interesting thing that occurs here, and again, I'll take the blame for this, this is an architectural phenomenon, is that we in IT tend to be enamored with gadgets, shiny objects, right? We tend to have the shiny object syndrome quite a bit, right? Because let's face it, most of us are stone nerds, right? Sorry, but it's true, most of us. I'm sure some of you lovely people are not. I am. And so what we see a piece of technology, we want to play with it, right? Push all the buttons, see what it does, implement all the features, isn't this bitchin', right? All these cool things. Is that what the business needs us to do? In a lab, that's probably the appropriate reaction, right? Understand the technical capabilities of the product so that you can explain them back to the business. However, in production, when you have a choice between doing it the complicated way, the cool way, and the cheap, simple way, which do you pick? My argument is the simplest way is the default answer. Because, in my world, complexity comes along all by itself for free. You don't need to create complexity. The world is already complex. So any chance that I have to remove complexity, I take it. I can't always do that, right? Sometimes the business requirements just cause complexity all by themselves. So I love this quote from Frank Lloyd Wright, right? So yes, Frank Lloyd Wright did not design IT systems for a living. But he was probably one of the greatest architects in American history. And his concept was, think simple. If it doesn't need to be in the design, don't put it in there, right? Don't put some curly Q on the end of the banister. You don't need that, right? That mantra, I think, is very healthy for us, right? Because unlike a building architect, the extra design flourishes that we put in our products don't show up right away, right? You're not ordering $1 million of Italian marble, right? But they show up on the back end in the operations, right? If I create a 15-step process for provisioning a VM when I could have created a 2-step process, the first time you do it, it's lovely, everything works fine. But now I'm doing that 1,000 times a day, right? Those extra steps start costing me money and time and effort, and there's complexity and there's possibility for error and, right? So that's why I throw this in. In the startup, in the software startup business, in the kind of the .com world, in the Web 2.0 world, they refer to this as minimum viable product, right, or MVP. The goal of a startup is not to create a complex, perfect product, right? The goal of a startup is to create something that just works, the minimum possible. Ship it, Get as many users as possible, and then repeat, because you're going to learn by doing. Ironically, well, maybe not ironically, but interestingly, this is also Microsoft's traditional philosophy as well. When I was at Microsoft, one of the core tenets that we lived by was that you learn by shipping, right? Ship it, and then learn. So if you look at classic Microsoft products, like SMS, for example, right? I don't know how many of you installed SMS 1.0. Anybody install? Yeah, Benny? OK. Was that a fun experience? I'll ask Benny because he works for Microsoft, so I can pick on him. How did that go, Benny? It was awesome. Yeah, uh-huh. Sure. Benny is still drinking the Kool-Aid. Wasn't so great, right? SMS 2 was a little better, right? Every version of that product gets better and better and better and better and better, right? And they just iterate. And that's Microsoft's strength, is they continue to iterate because of the knowledge that they've learned by being in market, right? They know pretty much everything there is to know now about software distribution because they've been doing it for 15 years. But that first time, nobody really knew because nobody was doing it. So that process of learning and growing is super important in our business. And so inside your own organization, when you start thinking about things like deploying private cloud, the question I would ask is not how many private cloud features can you cram in there, but how can you get something out, right? How can you get your users to perceive value sooner, right? So there's also this concept of time to value, right? How much time is going to elapse between now and when the end customer perceives value? If you can shorten that time, do it. And that's what we're trying to say here. So just a couple words about technology and technology risk, because this is a technical conference. So that's everything that I've said up to now is pre-positioning, right? It's getting you ready to do the cloud. The next bit is, OK, now that I've decided I'm going to do it, and I've got my business aligned, and I know I'm working on the right projects, now you have to kind of ask yourself, do I build or buy, right? Am I going to build my own system from scratch, or am I going to buy one? And to be honest, that decision is a very individualized decision. There's no right or wrong answer there. If you want to build things out of your own core components, then, and that's if you have requirements that are so unique that you have to do it on your own, then obviously you need to do that. On the other hand, thinking back to minimum viable product, if I can get value to my customers quicker but by buying something that's pre-packaged, maybe I should think about doing that. And that is exactly the intent of the Microsoft Private Cloud Fast Track program, right? So this is Microsoft's program, and I think there's actually a session later today talking about this in a little bit more detail. But the idea is that Microsoft has decided to certify and validate pre-baked hardware and software packages that we already know work, right? They don't take into account any of your custom requirements. It's just a box, and it works the way it works. So there's a trade-off. So you're trading off flexibility with speed and time to value. So the question you have to ask yourself is that a good trade-off to make? How do you make that trade-off decision? Well, that's what I've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, right? That's how you make the trade-off decision. Are you in a high-potential situation, right? Are you working on a strategic project? If time to market is your #1 consideration, then maybe you should sacrifice features for speed. If you're working on something that's key operational, maybe not. Depends on where you are in your IT portfolio. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the technical details about what's actually in the box here. There's a couple other sessions on this. I just wanted to bring this up because it's directly related to what we've been talking about, right? This is the reason why we worked with Microsoft to build pre-packaged solutions is because our perception is that if you are working on a class or project that requires speed and time to market, then this is the way that we as technology vendors can help you in your time to value equation. That you can add value to your end customers faster by using our guidance. Is that right for everybody? Nope, not right for everybody. But it's enough of you, I think, where it makes sense, and it's something to consider. The interesting thing is when you actually crack open the box, what's in there what's different about it is actually the management stack that sits on top of the hypervisor. So I know it was a long, long, long time ago, but about 35 minutes ago, I put up a slide that talks about the required elements for the NIST definition framework. I wasn't doing that just for giggles. There's a reason why I put that up. It turns out that we can satisfy all of those mandatory requirements and most of the optional ones using this management stack. So that's why we, NetApp, are really excited about this program, because it gives us a mechanism to deploy all of the NIST required elements in one go. And we didn't really have to write a lot of stuff to make it happen. So our strategy is to say, look, this Service Manager and the CSPP, the Cloud Services Process Pack, they already exist. They already have a self-service capability. Why would we write that ourselves? That makes no sense. Why don't we just integrate with what already exists from Microsoft and provide our value that way? It makes it a lot easier for us. Same thing with Orchestrator, right? If you think about those requirements that are coming from NIST, you're really not going to be able to meet them unless you have a highly automated solution, right? Remember, it talks about rapid scale and self-service, right? It doesn't actually say orchestration, but if you take a look at those requirements, it's almost impossible to meet them without some sort of orchestration platform underneath. So from a Microsoft perspective, they did a great job, and they bought Opalus, who was a fantastic player in this space. Now it's called Orchestrator. It's part of System Center. Our strategy is just plug right up underneath, right? So we have Opalus integration packs that plug directly into Opalus. You can build workflows without code, right? Again, it goes back to you can do stuff for your customers really, really quickly, right? I don't want you to be sitting in front of a console writing scripts for the next 6 months. You might find that very interesting. Sorry, Glenn. But it's probably not adding a tremendous amount of value to your company. If you can do exactly the same thing in 2 hours, why wouldn't you? And then underneath in the management layer, right, we've got our old friends Ops Manager, Virtual Machine Manager. Same thing, right? I could have written a VM provisioning system or an alert management system, right? I mean, it's just software. We could have done that. But again, why would we? So we created our own management packs that just plug up under Operations Manager. Then all of this, of course, sits on PowerShell, right? And so again, from a NetApp perspective, you've got the Data on Tap PowerShell toolkit, right? So that's our answer. Again, plugging up into a Microsoft strategy. And that all sits on top of Windows, right? And then we have our friend SnapDrive for Windows, which is our client software. And then, of course, this all sits on top of the hardware, and which on our case is Data on Tap, right? Which is our storage, data management platform. So I'm not trying to give you a big sell job here, but just trying to explain why we're doing what we're doing, right? So all these products that I just talked about are in this context of how do we help our customers be more successful in their private cloud deployments. We spent a lot of time analyzing the market, spoke to a lot of customers, spoke to a lot of CIOs, spoke to a lot of engineers, a lot of architects, and we think that the market, that you folks, are really ready to execute on this private cloud vision, but you just need a little help, right? There's some technology things that we can do for you. There's some people and process issues that need to be worked out. But fundamentally, if you choose to deploy private cloud now, we believe that your odds of success are very, 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 very good if you think business first, you focus on your business model, you focus on the correct projects, you manage your portfolio carefully, right? And then you manage your technical risk in appropriate ways, either through our process or somebody else's process. Whew. Okay. So, what does this all mean, right? What kind of conclusion am I asking you to draw? Well, there's a very famous quote that says, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from poor judgment, right? Learn from your mistakes. The reality is that you're not really in a position to make a big mistake unless you're in a position of authority, right? If you're not in charge of the project, your odds of causing the project to fail are quite a bit less. Those of us that have been asked to be engineers, lead engineers, architects, project leaders, IT leadership, we have a responsibility back to our end customers, right, our internal customers, to do the due diligence that we need to do to think about what we're doing, and probably more importantly for an architect, why? Why am I doing this? If you were an architect, I would ask you to ask that one simple question, right? Engineers ask how, right? Architects ask why. And that's why we're different. So, I hope you enjoyed this session. I hope it was informative to you. This is about 2 years of my life. I'm a little passionate about this subject, as you can see. I have written a book on this subject. Surprisingly enough, it's called Why We Fail. Strange. If you come by our booth in the Park Room Pavilion and you allow us to scan your badge, you will get an email after the show offering you a free copy of my book. So if you found this presentation interesting, which is no means a given, come by the booth, get scanned, and we'll send you an electronic copy of the book, complimentary, just for being a NetApp customer and coming by the booth. Okay? So that's the presentation. Don't go anywhere, though. But that's the presentation. Thank you all very, very much.